This thriller starts with Eddie trapped in a luxury apartment, admitting he miscalculated badly. Men are outside his door, shouting his name like they came to collect more than rent. Eddie says the second your life beats your wildest dreams, a knife shows up behind you. He cannot get into his own safe room and the countdown in his head is getting ugly. He makes one decision before they reach him: they are not touching him alive. Even his neighbor gets dragged into it, and the killers promise Eddie is next. For a man who claims a 4-digit IQ, Eddie is about to hit only one thing: the sidewalk. Then the movie rewinds to Eddie before all this, broke, filthy, and looking worse than he should. He is technically a writer with a book contract, but nobody believes he can actually write it. When Eddie tries explaining the book, even he cannot finish the sentence. He keeps promising today is the day, then immediately teaches himself the one rule he cannot follow: stay in the room. Weeks pass like that, and the only solid thing left in his life is Lindy. But Lindy finally breaks up with him because she already knows the book is going nowhere. Eddie tries sweet-talking her, but she lists what she really became: cleaner, bank, and exhausted girlfriend. He almost proposes out of panic, and Lindy shuts that down before he can finish. She reminds him he already rushed into one marriage, and that one collapsed almost instantly. The worst part is, she still loves him, but she just got a real editor job while Eddie is stuck. After she leaves, Eddie sees his future clearly: childhood bedroom, jersey, and dental supply inventory. Then he runs into Vernon, his ex-brother-in-law, the exact kind of person you forget for safety. Vern clocks how bad Eddie looks and drags him into a drink at 2 p.m. Eddie admits the truth: he has a book deal and he has written exactly 0 words. Vern says he can help, and if you want the rest of this spiral, like and subscribe. Eddie assumes Vern is still dealing, but Vern sells the pill as a fancy brain drug from pharma trials. Vern claims it lets people access all of their brain, not the tiny slice they usually use. Eddie calls it exactly what it sounds like: a shiny designer drug handed to a depressed broke guy. Vern leaves him the pill anyway and says one dose cost $800. Walking home drunk, Eddie thinks about every failure he has ever repeated. So he asks the most dangerous question a desperate person can ask: how much worse could it get? He swallows the pill right before his landlord's wife Valerie corners him about rent. Valerie tears into him and Eddie wonders if he just took a hallucinogen at the worst possible time. Then the drug hits and Eddie describes it like blindness turning into sight. Valerie is still yelling, but Eddie suddenly reads her anger instead of just reacting to it. From one glimpse of a book, he figures out her law school problem and pulls up a forgotten college memory. Old articles, documentaries, and half-seen facts start combining inside his head like useful electricity. In 45 minutes, he helps Valerie turn her paper into something polished. Then he gets home and sees his apartment like a crime scene he has been living inside. He is not high or wired, he is clear, tidy, focused, and finally knows what to do. The next morning, the brilliance is gone and regular Eddie is back in the room. But something remains: pages exist now, and his editor only needs 3 to realize he changed. Soon she is 40 pages in, still reading, and demanding to know how he did it. Eddie runs back to Vernon for more, but Vernon opens the door beaten and scared. Vern finally admits the pill is called NZT 48 and the FDA story was complete nonsense. Eddie sums it up: unknown lab, dangerous drug, unreliable dealer. Then he still wants more. Vern makes Eddie run errands first, and Eddie knows he would do anything for another pill. When Eddie comes back, Vernon is dead, and now this brain pill has a body count. Waiting for police, Eddie realizes the killer knew Vernon and was probably searching for the stash. He tears through Vernon's apartment, finds the pills, then the police burst in and point guns at him. Eddie lies badly, claiming Vernon dealt antiques, complete with nonsense about curly chair legs. Then Vernon's sister calls, and it is Melissa, Eddie's ex-wife, warning him without saying enough. After the cops leave, Eddie looks at the stolen pills and asks if this risk is worth it. With Vern's cash and daily NZT, Eddie finishes his entire book in 4 days. 1 pill a day makes everything reachable: piano, math, languages, all loading at impossible speed. He can argue literature, advise his mother on cancer research, and sound like he has studied for decades. At parties, his brain pours out history, finance, and human behavior with terrifying confidence. New friends flock to him, and one beach invite turns into a full private jet lifestyle shift. Fear and shyness vanish, but sitting still becomes torture, so Eddie starts chasing dangerous thrills. He realizes books are too small now, he needs money for something much bigger. In a dead market, Eddie turns $800 into thousands, then decides that is too slow. Since banks will not touch him, he goes to a violent loan shark for $100,000. Eddie tries explaining algorithms, but the loan shark only understands one thing: he must have a fix. The loan comes with a nightmare promise: fail to pay, and Eddie gets skinned alive. At a day trading firm, Eddie doses higher, learns faster, and ends the week with over 2 million. Word spreads fast: jobs, banks, reporters, and a meeting with billionaire Carl Van Loon. Lindy hears Carl wants him and asks the obvious question: what can Eddie possibly offer him? Eddie meets Lindy again, speaking Italian and apologizing like a man who rebooted his entire life. She is proud, a little intimidated, and before long they are back together everywhere. The press calls Eddie a market prophet, and Lindy starts joking about moving into his place. But on the night before Van Loon, Eddie stops sleeping, stops eating, and starts drifting. Kevin warns him Carl is ruthless, but Eddie is barely holding himself together over breakfast. Carl asks Eddie's secret and Eddie almost tells the truth: special medication. Eddie turns the lie into a finance pitch about research, rumors, mass psychology, and pattern recognition. When challenged, Eddie drops the number, 12,000 to 2.3 million in 10 days. Carl does not fully trust him, but he sees enough to test him on a stack of companies. Eddie instantly sees the real play as a massive merger with Hank Atwood, not the companies on the page. He impresses Carl enough to earn a second meeting, but now he has to be prepared. Walking home, Eddie imagines Wall Street CEO power, maybe even the presidency. Then time skips. Eddie suddenly cannot remember walking 20 blocks through the city. A street fight starts and his brain pulls self-defense moves from half-seen old footage. The night keeps skipping through bars and strangers until Eddie loses 18 full hours. Lindy's missed call proves he disappeared on her too, and that makes the blackout harder to ignore. Off NZT, Van Loon's files look unreadable, but Kevin forces Eddie to show up anyway. Carl asks about Atwood, and Eddie stumbles like the old version of himself is leaking through. A news report says socialite Maria Winberg was murdered, and Eddie wonders if his missing hours killed her. Melissa calls to warn him Vernon's pills are dangerous, and Eddie begs her to meet. He checks Vernon's other clients and finds the pattern: 3 dead, the rest badly sick. Someone follows Eddie through the city before he finally reaches Melissa. Melissa looks damaged, and she says NZT once made her look like she had her life together too. She read Impossible Science in minutes, worked insanely fast, and scared her own boss. Then she quit, got headaches and vomiting, and learned from Vernon that users were dying. Her warning is blunt: if Eddie stops suddenly, he could die, so he has to taper down. The loan shark catches him late, notices the pills, and forces one down like it is candy. The gangster feels the upgrade immediately, and Eddie's secret is now inside a violent man's head. Eddie gets sick and tells Lindy everything, then begs her to retrieve his hidden stash. She agrees, then finds out he hid the pills in her apartment. Unbelievable is generous. On the way back, Lindy realizes a man is following her cab and getting closer. She runs for help, but the pursuer kills the men who step in for her. Pinned down, Lindy calls Eddie and he tells her to take NZT because her brain will find a way out. As the killer closes in, Eddie says he loves her because this might be the last thing she hears. NZT kicks in, Lindy spots a route, weaponizes a child's ice skates and survives. Afterward, Eddie says he can protect them, but Lindy says the person on NZT is not really him. He dreams about the life the drug can build, and she tells him he may live it without her. Eddie promises he has a plan to get off it after he makes them safe. The loan shark returns for more NZT, and Eddie realizes a few pills only buy temporary peace. Eddie hires hidden security and gives instructions so precise they sound like a spy manual. Carl forgives Eddie's sick day only because Eddie's revised projections embarrassed his entire team. 2 months into NZT, Eddie is brokering the biggest corporate merger ever and managing the side effects. He even has secret pill compartments sewn into all of his jackets. He pays a scientist to reproduce NZT fast, but the formula is dangerous without real testing. Then a detective connects Eddie to Maria Winberg's murder and asks where he was that night. Eddie hires Morris Brandt, a brutal lawyer, because he cannot keep the murder problem quiet alone. While he may be facing charges, Eddie keeps guiding Carl and Atwood through a secret Libya power play. Atwood looks frail, and nobody in the room understands why this titan is suddenly fading. Carl warns Eddie not to think intelligence alone earns him a seat at the table. Eddie upgrades from hotel rooms to an $8.5 million fortress with a view. The loan shark is now on NZT2, smarter, crueler, and blackmailing Eddie for 20 pills a week. Eddie believes $40 million can solve the gangster problem after Atwood signs. But Atwood misses the signing because he is in the hospital with pain and dizziness. Eddie understands the real reason: Atwood is out of NZT, and his withdrawal is killing him. At the police lineup, Eddie waits to see if a witness can identify him as Maria's killer. Back at the merger news leaks, Atwood falls into a coma, and Eddie's own dose is wearing off. His hidden NZT is gone, Carl smells a lie, and Eddie can barely keep his body upright. The news says the merger rumor is false, while Atwood's team sends everyone to their attorney. Now we are back at the beginning, Eddie in the bunker, killers outside, and no good exit. His foggy brain searches for one last tablet because possible is the only plan left. The loan shark breaks in with Eddie's last pill and reveals he injects NZT straight into his bloodstream. He demands the rest of the supply, but Eddie is out, so torture becomes his negotiation method. NZT has even expanded this thug's vocabulary, which somehow makes his torture speech worse. Eddie wounds him, but the only NZT left is now running through the gangster's blood. So Eddie does the disgusting math and uses that blood to get the drug back into himself. Enhanced again, Eddie fights through the remaining intruders inside his own fortress. Police later blame the attack on the apartment's previous arms dealer owner, which is convenient. Eddie also learns Brandt stole Atwood's life-saving NZT instead of delivering it. With the threats cleared, Eddie sees one path still open, the future he wanted. Time jumps ahead, and Eddie is now a Senate candidate with packed fundraisers and giant donors. Carl appears, now owning Iban Chemcorp, the pharmaceutical company tied to Eddie's secret. He hints Eddie is headed far beyond the Senate, but only if he can maintain the drug. Carl reveals Iban makes NZT, then says Eddie's private lab was shut down that morning. His offer is simple, unlimited NZT in exchange for influence over Eddie's political future. Eddie refuses, saying a smart man on NZT would have more than one lab, then reveals he is not making it anymore. He says he re-engineered NZT, removed the bugs, tapered off, and is now clean. Carl threatens him anyway, so Eddie fires back with hidden scandals Carl never wanted exposed. To prove his brain still works, Eddie predicts a crash on the street before Carl even notices the van. Then he diagnoses Carl's heart problem by touch and makes the billionaire look suddenly small. Eddie tells Carl that if he worked for him, Carl would end up serving Eddie instead. He walks away to lunch with Lindy, calling himself a new man, and maybe this time he means it. That is limitless. One pill made Eddie unstoppable, but surviving it made him dangerous, so like and subscribe. Eddie ends the movie smiling across the table, and the scariest question is whether he is telling the truth. If he really changed his brain permanently, Carl just met a future president he cannot control. And if Eddie is bluffing, then the clock on his brilliance is still running out. Either way, the failed writer from page 0 is gone, and that is why this ending hits. For more fast movie recaps with the actual plot beats, like and subscribe.